In this interview, I spoke with Nodle's co-founder and CEO, Micha Benoliel. Now, I did an explainer video back in January on Nodle, and I've been building a relationship with them since then, and I even met the team in Miami during the Bitcoin conference in May, and they're really awesome people. I even met Tim Draper at their dinner party, so that was pretty wild. Anyway, if you saw my most recent video on Nodle, you know that I covered the recent partnership with ESTV and the updates to the Nodle Cash App UI. I asked viewers to send in questions for this AMA, and then we would choose the top 5 for me to ask Micha. Those 5 winners will also receive 200 USDT each, and the top 20 questions will get 25 Nodle Cash each. And those rewards will go out within 48 hours of this video going live. I want to give a huge thank you to the community for joining in this. We received over 130 questions, and only one of them asked when moon, so I call that a major success. Crypto community is getting all mature. It brings tears to my eyes. Now, before we start, I want to give a bit of transparency on how we chose these questions. We focused on finding questions that were relevant and thoughtful. And a lot of people asked similar questions, so in those cases, we just chose the ones that had a bit more effort put into them or mentioned some unique aspect that we wanted to talk about. There were many questions asking about comparisons to their competitors like Helium, or questions about privacy and their new UI, all of which we covered in the interview. Now, I did paraphrase a little bit in a couple of these questions just to make it a bit clearer, but for the most part, I left them as they were. Now, thanks again to everyone who sent in questions. I will do more of these in the future, so make sure you're subscribed with the bell notification so you don't miss out. I also announced these earlier in the DeFi Now Discord, which is the best place to get alpha leaks on this, so join that from the link in the description. Now, let's get started. Micha, thank you for joining me.
Well, I'm super happy to be with you here today, Josh, and to answer the questions from the community. Thank you again.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be doing this with you guys. Well, okay, let's get started. So we've got 5 questions. Both the Nodle team and I went through. We picked out. We had over 130 questions sent in for this AMA. So it took us quite a while to go through all of them. But we picked out our 5 favorites, and then if we have some extra time, I've got a couple extra runner-up questions that we also thought were pretty good. So I'm not sure if we'll have time to get to those. So let's start with question number 1. This is from Anonymous. And the question is, although Nodle has the advantage of being able to sign up the most people quickly and grow their network faster than the competition, competing networks promise a longer range of coverage and more consistency per device. How does Nodle deal with the claims that the competition has a better range of coverage and the consistency because their devices are always on?
So it's a very good question, and it touches on a lot of the technical aspects of IoT, and also when it comes to IoT, what kind of wireless interface to use. I think when this anonymous user asked the question, is probably thinking about technologies like LoRaWAN, which are longer range, and is comparing most probably what Helium is doing with their base stations to what we are doing with Nodle, using a different interface, which is the Bluetooth interface, and we use Bluetooth Low Energy. So there are some use cases in IoT where you actually need to have that long range to be able to capture information from a sensor. I'll give you a very simple example. It can be on a pipeline for that's moving oil, or and basically in that case, yeah, you may want to use a sensor which is a longer range, like a LoRaWAN sensor, because you will have to broadcast that measurement pretty far away from where the sensor is. And it makes sense to use a technology like LoRaWAN in this kind of specific use cases. Now, when it comes to Nodle, we decided to start building this decentralized network with Bluetooth, using Bluetooth Low Energy. Bluetooth Low Energy is a wireless interface that's present on more than 50% of all IoT devices. That means each manufactured IoT devices, actually half of them already have a Bluetooth wireless interface. And then Bluetooth Low Energy works in many other different use cases where this range is not necessarily needed. So when you are in a city, for example, and when you deploy a network like Nodle, you have so many people walking around that the density is creating the coverage, and that's enough to capture information from an air quality sensor, for example. The other benefit of using a shorter range when you have the density is that you can leverage, in our case, the capabilities of the smartphone. So you can tag the location of an item with the location of the phone, which will give you the pretty precise or close to precise location of that specific item. And that's a big use case in the IoT space, which is the location tracking of things. And in this case, Bluetooth actually plays very, very well, because if you use another sensor that has a longer range, then you need to add a GPS, then it increases the cost of the device. It increases the consumption of energy of the device. Where when you use Bluetooth low energy, you can just have a basic tag, which is also very cost effective, and then you can still acquire the location of that device very easily using the crowd of smartphones.
So the idea is that if you have the density that's required, then you get a lot better accuracy, and then you can use the GPS of smartphones rather than having GPS device built into every IoT device.
That's one aspect of it. But to answer this question, I think there are different types of wireless networks, and they are actually very complementary. We even have manufacturers of sensors that use LoRaWAN or that use a Sigfox, which is another wireless technology, and they also add a Bluetooth wireless radio on it because they want to be able to acquire location that way. So they can be also very complementary.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Let's move on. We've got question number 2. This one's from Winton Odd. That's his Telegram username. So do you see A16Z Capital's raise for Helium as good news for the IoT industry for their growth and awareness as a whole? Or do you think that will affect Nodle's competitive edge?
I think it is a fantastic news. I mean, look at what happened to Helium token when the news got basically introduced, and the volume of exchange on the Helium network. Basically, you can see that it went from 30 million daily volume. So as soon as this injection of 100 million happened, obviously the volume went up to 130 millions in the days after, or the same day. So it's good because not only it created this huge influx of cash and it increased the volume of exchange, but also took the price of Helium to almost double, I think, on the market. So I think it's a good thing for the overall industry. It means that the same way when you look at the blockchain industry in general, decentralized finance with DeFi occupy a lot of that space. There's a lot of activity. That's where you have a lot of profitability, a lot of great projects in the DeFi, which are also more and more high standard projects, and I would say very, very serious projects. And I think what we see and what the move that Andreessen made is confirming is that you have another space that also is becoming very legitimate and very important in the overall blockchain wide industry, which is decentralized wireless. And I think that you could call it DY is going to take a big part, and it's very important actually to lay down the infrastructure at the level of connectivity that will enable also all the other ecosystem to flow and to and it will enable this exchange of tokens on top of this connectivity infrastructure at some point. So I think it's a very good news, great for the industry, confirms the necessity for decentralized wireless, confirms that it's probably the next big thing after DeFi, and so it's a great news for Nodle.
I completely agree, and I've never heard the term DY before, so that's interesting to think about that. And I think it is really important because if we don't have decentralized infrastructure for these networks, we're going to have like Amazon's that they're already building, or one of the other large tech companies will build it and then they have control over it and they will sell everybody's data like they always do.
You touch on a very good point there. It's totally necessary if we want to guarantee the integrity of this whole new industry that we are building. We need decentralized wireless. We need autonomous systems that are going to enable a better connectivity and basically support this whole ecosystem. So yeah, I completely agree with you on this.
Awesome. Okay, let's move on to question 3. So this one's also from Anonymous. Can a user be tracked based on the IoT devices that he's connected to everywhere he walks or at his home? And how does Nodle Cash anonymize that data?
Very important question and very good question. So first, and I will just start to explain how the Nodle Cash app works. I mean, and if you are one of the users of the Nodle Cash app, you probably know already that we don't ask for your name, we don't ask for your email. We basically ask no personal information that will enable us to identify you. And we randomize the nodes also. And the identities of these nodes, we made them temporary, they change. So that way we cannot identify basically who are our users. It's very important for us. And we basically put a lot of care to make sure to maintain as much as we can this anonymity on the nodes that participate onto our network. Now, that being said, to refer to the specific question of the IoT device that a user would keep with them, it depends on the kind of information that the owner of the device or the person buying the data from that device is expecting. It can be that the data that is required or the buyer is expecting, or the owner is location. In that case, yeah, you need to provide the location, and that's the use case of the Apple AirTag. If you put an AirTag on your backpack, you actually want to know where is your backpack, even if you carry it with you all the time. So Apple has does it in a way where they usually don't provide a history of basically the location of that AirTag. They will give you the location at a given time when you ask basically for that specific location, if you need to find your backpack, for example. At Nodle, we deal more with industrial use cases. So when it comes to using location tracking of an item, it will be, for example, for a shipping pallets, it will be for package, for a mail, and yes, for practical reason, we may want to have and provide the history of that, basically that mail, if it's working with a rapid courier, for example. So that being said, we anonymize, like I said, everything as much as we can. Now, if the owner of the device wants to know the location of the device, and that's what basically where is the value. I mean, it's hard not to basically to operate and by not providing that location. So I mean, there are use cases that in some cases may reveal more information, but I think everyone is conscious of that, and it's important that everyone remains very conscious of that. And if they are not, that we all do in the ecosystem and the industry actually a better job at educating people when their location can be exposed.
So even if you're giving that location data, so if you're running the Nodle Cash app, then even though your device is giving the location data, it's not giving your personal location data, because your personal identity is separate from your.
There's no identity in that case. We tag the location to the item or the device that basically the IoT device, basically, because that's the information that the owner of the device or the operator of the device is looking for.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, let's go to our next question. This one's question number 4 from Anonymous. As an avid Pokemon Go / Ingress player, I'm really excited about the upcoming app update and the gamification it adds to the mix. Is it possible that we see further gaming features or mechanics down the road?
So I think we are all super pumped and excited to ship the new version of the app. I mean, I can't wait for it. We did added this new, we can consider kind of gamification, and because it's true that you're going to have the map, it could be looking like a bit more like Pokemon Go, and you could be incentivized to go and collect data from specific devices in a specific location or sensors. And I think it's a great start. Let's see how it goes, and maybe from there, actually, the community may suggest also their ideas on how we can bring more incentive and gamification to the app. But I think it's already a good start. One way to look at it is you could, for example, incentivize people to go in places where actually there is less density, and reward these users for collecting data from sensors in these specific places more than if they were in other locations. So. But let's see how this new version already plays out, and then after we can start to think about more gamification.
Okay, and if users have other ideas, what's the best way for them to share them?
They just share it on our community channel with our ambassadors or people who work in our community, or they can just email us directly.
All right, and then we've got our last question of our top 5 questions. This one's also about the UI. So with the new layout of the app, it looks like it's set up to create events on the map. For example, this could be used to, say, promote the opening of a mall.
That sounds to me a bit like almost like a treasure hunt. There will be some of that, I think. Like for example, like I mentioned earlier, maybe to incentivize people to go in places where we don't have that much density. Now, is that going to be tied to a live event or a specific location, retail location? I mean, we haven't thought about that for now. I think we have a lot of things we need a bit more experience and time to see how basically the map plays out and how people are going to behave.
And I think in a case where there's a mall opening, it's going to be a very dense area, but generally there's going to be more incentive to try and get more people to go to where it's less dense, like you were saying, right?
All that also, so that's one factor, but it also depends on the value of the data that is collected onto the IoT devices that are connected, basically that the user will connect to. So it really depends also on the type of IoT device or type of sensor data.
Awesome. So if you've got time, we haven't been going too long. I got a couple other questions that I just liked and I thought that they would be good. So these
Absolutely.
are the runner-up questions. This one especially I liked is, in the near future, do you have a plan to launch a mining device or some kind of similar device which can extend the range of Bluetooth low energy data capture to a phone? And they said they would like to get on the whitelist if you do.
Yeah, there are some Bluetooth routers that have the capability of connecting to IoT devices or collect data from sensors and beacons from a longer range. We don't have a plan to ship this kind of devices. I am sure manufacturers already exist, they do, and could be able to ship these devices. The good thing is we have a version of our app for Linux that is almost ready, and that version of the app will be able to run on devices like Raspberry Pi. And since it's based on the Linux kernel, I think it will be very easy to push this version of the app on other devices, and maybe that could be of interest to a few manufacturers of the devices you just mentioned.
Generally, what kind of range do you get with Bluetooth? Maybe just like in a cell phone.
It depends on where you are, but you can get up to 200 feet with Bluetooth low energy if you are like in an open environment. And there is a version of Bluetooth low energy that can even go a mile away.
Oh, wow.
But you can only move tiny bits of information.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the next one. This one's what exactly is inside a pack of information, and why are some packets worth more in Nodle Cash than others?
So many information can be basically encapsulated in these packets. It can be a public information like sensor temperature. It can be an encrypted identity. It can be a public identity. And the value is something that is attributed to whether the data someone pays to basically access that information, and who owns potentially the device and the sensors who basically are generating that information and wants to recover that information or to connect to this device to get that information. So in that case, that packet, let's say it's an air quality sensor and deployed by a city, and the city wants to collect that information, then the city is paying to access the network and collect that information from these air quality sensors. So these packets of information have a higher value than if it was a sensor just broadcasting a temperature randomly that nobody basically has decided to purchase that information from. But because we want to keep the ecosystem active, and it's going to take time before we onboard more and more cities or organizations and enterprise buying that information, we do reward actually a packet from a temperature sensor that would be completely random in a location where from time to time people are passing by. So that's why there is a difference in the value of the information.
So generally, it's just market driven. If people want to, somebody needs to purchase the data that's coming from that sensor, then whoever's transmitting those packets through their app will get more nodal from it than if it's just, like you were saying, just a temperature sensor that's randomly broadcasting. But right now, while you're bootstrapping the network, Nodle is giving additional rewards to people just to get people involved.
Absolutely, and there are many other possibilities we thought about. So, for example, to incentivize privacy and security and incentivize the whole industry to do a better job, we could also pay more for actually packets of information that are encrypted at the level of the IoT device.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So I think these things are going to evolve. That's why we are pretty open to receive any suggestions and also see how the industry is going to behave, and we will adapt.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share with everybody while we're here?
Well, I'm super pumped and excited to see that you received 130 questions. I think it's a great sign that there is a great momentum for the new version of the app. I mean, I'm probably the most excited and impatient when it comes to see that new version out. So I'll make sure basically everyone can have it in their hands as soon as possible. And I mean, I love the energy in the community. Josh, I love your reviews. I think the first one you made was really, really amazing in how you understand what we do. And I think you're bringing a lot of clarity and also a great information for the overall community that we are trying to build. And to make things that sometimes are a bit complicated with IoT more easier to understand for everyone. So fantastic job. Thank you again for organizing this interview and the AMA.
Yeah, likewise. I spent a lot of time to do that first video because it is hard to understand because it's so new. But yeah, I agree. It's been awesome, and I'm really glad that you guys came and wanted to do this interview and share the UI with me before anybody else. It was real cool to do it. And
no, we're super happy to do it.
And 130 questions. I did not expect to get that many responses in there. So that was really awesome. So yeah, I want to thank the community. I want to thank Nodle for coming on here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everyone.